This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the IIEA webinar on enforcement on the EU AI Act. My name is Joyce O'Connor and I chair the digital group here at the IIEA. And it's my great pleasure to welcome our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Lucilla Sioli, Director of the AI Office in DG Connect in the European Commission. Lucilla, you're very welcome, and we look forward to your presentation. And thank you so much for being with us today, because I know your office and yourself are very, very busy. Dr. Sioli will speak to us for around 20 minutes, and then I will go to the Q&A to you, our audience. You can join our discussion as usual using the QA function at the bottom of your screen. Please feel free to send in your questions or comments during Lucilla's presentation, and I appreciate very much if you give your name and designation when you're asking a question. As is usual, today's presentation is on the record as well as the Q&A, and please feel free to join us on Twitter or X using the handle @IIEA. There is little doubt that AI will continue to be the most talked about and powerful technology in the coming year. We can see that the fourth industrial revolution powered by AI is advancing at a pace that previous technologies, much quicker than previous technologies. From the classroom to the boardroom, from hospital to homes, AI is interwoven in our lives. Ireland's AI Advisory Council issued its strategic policy recommendations to government, helping to shape Ireland's AI future. And that was issued last Friday, together with two papers, one on AI in education and the other on the impact of AI on Ireland's cultural sector. The EU aims to ensure that AI is safe, trustworthy and ethical. For this purpose, the AI Act is the first ever comprehensive legal framework on AI worldwide, guaranteeing the health, safety and fundamental rights of people and providing legal certainty for businesses across 27 member states. The European AI Office is at the centre of AI expertise across the EU. It plays a key role in implementing the AI Act, especially for general purpose AI, fostering the development and use of trustworthy AI and international cooperation. It does this while protecting against AI risks. So how will this happen? Well, today we've got Dr. Lucilla Sioli to tell us how it will happen. And she will discuss the enforcement of the EU AI Act, explore the enforcement framework for the Act, and how the legislation will be implemented in practice. She will also focus in particular attention on the role of the AI Office and how it can help coherent cooperation between regulators across different sectors and member states. Dr. Sioli, as you know, has been with the Commission since 1997, and she's the Director of the AI Office in DG Connect. She was previously the Director of Artificial Intelligence and Digital Industry within DG Connect, where she was responsible for the development of AI policy, including the AI Act, and for the digitalisation of industrial strategy. Lucilla, we really look forward to your presentation today, and thank you again for being with us.
Thank you very much, Joyce, for your nice introduction. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here and to have the possibility to speak to you about the implementation of the AI Act. If we can go to the next slide. As it was said at the beginning, I now have the honor to lead the European AI Office, which was set up in June this year. And I would like to start by indicating and highlighting that the mission of the AI Office is wider than the implementation of the AI Act. In fact, our objective, the objective of AI policy in the European Union, is to stimulate the development and the uptake of AI in the European Union, And that means, on the one hand, putting in place research and innovation policies that support the development and the adoption of AI in the EU. And on the other hand, now we already have the AI Act, so we want to implement it to make sure that we have trust in the technology, which means that people and organizations use AI, and in turn, this use of AI will offer incentives also to the innovators and to those that have to deploy AI. So I think it's very important that we keep in mind this, let's say, objective of the AI office, because we certainly do not want it. When we talk only about the AI Act, very often people think that we just want to limit the use of AI in the European Union, and I just want to start by saying that it is not so at all. We want AI to be developed and deployed in the European Union. We want people to use it. We think it's a very important technology with a very important impact on our lives and our economies, but at the same time that we have to trust it and that we have to respect the rules that we have proposed, because these rules, as was said in the introduction, are important to make sure that our fundamental rights and our safety are not violated by the irresponsible use of the technology. Next slide. So today I will speak about the AI Act and the implementation of the AI Act. So I will I imagine that many of you know the details of the AI Act. I will try to keep it short and simple. But just for everybody to recall that the AI Act has the objective of harmonizing the rules in the single market, which means that we have one AI Act in the single market. Member states are not expected to put in place further legislation on AI or legislation on AI that overlaps with the AI Act. And this is very important for us because if we didn't have one act today, we would probably have a number of different acts in the European Union, and this, of course, would create a lot of fragmentation and difficulties for developers and for deployers of AI. The AI Act is complementary to other legislation. We can discuss this later, but we are really making an effort right now discussing with colleagues and groups and representatives of member states to make sure that the implementation of the AI Act happens in complementarity with other legislation without creating further red tape, but really aligning all the processes so that they are simple to implement. It focuses on systems in the sense that it focuses very much on the idea that we don't want to have our fundamental rights and our safety be violated by the use of AI, but we will see also that there is a part of the AI Act that rather focuses also on the models that enable, in particular, the very large general purpose models and systems. We consider it innovation friendly. Of course, many people will come forward and say that regulation is never innovation friendly. I would disagree with that because I said at the beginning, we need the trust if we want to have the use of the technology and therefore incentives to innovate. But I also want to add that we will see that the AI Act is risk-based, which means that it only addresses a specific number of applications which are likely to violate our fundamental rights and our safety. And in doing that, therefore, it doesn't apply to the whole of the artificial intelligence market, but only to a very small part of it and to a very targeted part of it. Sorry. Next slide, please. So it is always difficult to explain the AI Act, and the easiest representation we have always found from the very beginning is this pyramid. As I said, it's a a risk-based piece of legislation. Most of the market is not addressed, so that's the green that you see at the basis of this pyramid. We have considered some transparency risk for some, for example, chatbots or deepfakes. We would like, for example, chatbots to tell to the user that they're interacting with a chatbot. It may seem obvious to us, we use chatbots every day, but there is a lot of people in our society for which this is not so obvious. Then we have higher risk, that's what we call high risk. And this is very much the core, if you want, of the legislation. And this is about the fact that we have identified a number of applications, which include applications such as applications for recruitment or applications used in medical devices, which can violate our fundamental rights and our safety. And therefore, what we require is that before they are put on the European market, that they're checked. We invite the deployers or the developers to document and to be transparent about the way they have developed the system. Normally, if these systems are embedded in a machine, for example, in a medical device, and that medical device is regulated through the medical device regulation, then that AI system will also have to be checked by a third party. In the other cases, when AI is based basically only on software and is not embedded in a machine, we require a self-assessment that really gives this kind of information, transparency about the way the system has been developed, transparency given to the user in terms of the way the system can be used or not used, and so on. And then on top of the pyramid, we have a very small number of applications that we do not want to see in the European Union because we consider that the risk is unacceptable. For example, social scoring, or, for example, emotion recognition in the working place and in education. So we have 8 examples of prohibitions that we really do not want to see in the European Union, but all the other applications of artificial intelligence, of course, they can be deployed in the European market. Next slide. We then have a second part of the AI Act, which is about the general purpose AI models, basically the frontier models, the very, the generative AI models. And here, what we require is that all these models that have a minimal size, for example, 1 billion parameters, are actually transparent, in particular for companies that are downstream that will use these models to fine-tune them into specific applications. And therefore, in particular, when those applications end up then in the high-risk areas, well, the downstream companies need to have a certain kind of information about how these models actually work. And then we focus our rules on the very frontier models. These are the models that are very capable. And because they're very capable, they can actually create some systemic risk. And so for these very capable models, we have a certain number of obligations that we are now addressing together with stakeholders, in the sense that we are working with stakeholders in a code of practice where we will specify how in practice one can comply with those obligations, so that signing up to this code of practice can also be represent a way of being presumed to comply with the obligations. Next slide. How do we enforce the AI Act? So the part that I explained earlier with the prohibitions and the high risk, the part of the pyramid basically, will be enforced by authorities in European member states. And since the use cases can be in different sectors, many countries who are now designating their relevant authorities tend to choose the sectoral regulatory authority, for example, the financial regulator for the finance sector and so on. But when it comes to the general purpose models, then the enforcement, the supervisor is with the European Commission. And so it's in the European AI office, where we are now also created a new unit that we call the safety unit, where we have technology specialists and experts who will be carrying out this work of making sure that the general purpose models with systemic risk are actually safe and that transparency is actually respected in the European market. Now, we will not be working alone because, well, on the one hand, of course, we work with the member states and we work in a board that we call the AI board. Here, all member states are represented and also the market surveillance authorities. So this will be very important to make sure that the market surveillance authorities actually work coherently and the implementation of the Act is consistent across the European Union. Secondly, we set up a scientific panel which will help us in particular to work on the general purpose AI models and to raise our attention in case they identify certain risks in the market that have not been identified by the AI office. And thirdly, we work with an advisory forum made of representatives from civil society organizations, academics, but also industry, who will advise us on a number of items, for example, on the list of high-risk applications, if that list has to be modified, should be prolonged, or that there have been accidents that we should be notified about, and so on. So we will still have to launch the advisory forum. We will launch it in the second half of the year, but it's a very important forum for us because it will be our way of talking to the community. Next slide. Therefore, if I have to summarize the role of the AI office in the governance, is then on the one hand, when it comes to the high-risk applications and to the prohibitions, we have to make sure that the market surveillance authorities from the member states behave in a coherent way. And by the way, when there is a problem with one application in more than one country, then these authorities have to consult with the European Commission. Secondly, we offer the oversight and we're responsible for the enforcement of the rules on general purpose models. And thirdly, through the governance mechanism and the different bodies that I described earlier, we take into account the views of experts and interested stakeholders in our society, and we actually provide the secretariat to all these bodies. Next slide. The timeline for the entry into application of the different rules seems a little complicated because the AI Act in reality is already in force since August 2024. But the different groups of rules are applicable at different points in time. So the prohibitions are already applicable since the beginning of February. This is important because co-legislators decided that these prohibitions were so relevant that they couldn't be tolerated on the European market, and therefore these prohibitions are already applicable. The rules for general purpose models and the obligations become applicable in August this year. The rules for the high-risk artificial intelligence systems, which are based only on software, they apply in 2026. And then the rules for high-risk systems that are embedded in machines apply in 2027. Now, this difference in timing is due to the fact that it takes time for member states to be able to organize their governance. And so that's why the rules on high risk, which, as I said, are implemented and enforced by market surveillance authorities at the national level, start later than other rules. And then when the AI system is embedded in machines, very often it means that we have to align processes because Very often deployers have to get a CE marking because they maybe put on the market a robot with an artificial intelligence system on it. And we want to make sure that these procedures are aligned so that we have one CE marking and the certification takes place in the same place. And that's why as these are systems that get certified by third parties, it takes a little bit longer than the other rules to be applicable. Next slide. If we consider the implementation, then I will tell you where we are at the moment. So our implementation goes through three main blocks of activities. First of all, is that we have to have in place the governance structure because we work with member states and academics and civil society and industry. So we already set up the AI board. We have already met with member states a number of times, and we will soon launch a call for expression of interest to people who are interested in participating in the scientific panel, and the call for the advisory forum, which will be probably published in a few months' time. In the meanwhile, we are growing the AI office in the sense that we are recruiting people. We are recruiting in particular technology specialists that are working in the safety unit. And we are also recruiting some profiles of legal and policy colleagues. Secondly, we need to give guidance. It's very important when you have legislation to give guidance because, of course, it may be difficult to follow. And we certainly don't want to increase the red tape and also increase the cost for any company needing legal advice. So we really commit to the publication of guidance documents. And also to activities in terms of co-regulation, like the code of practice that I mentioned earlier for the general purpose models. We are also working very intensively on the development of standards because standards can really facilitate implementation of this kind of legislation, because every time a company will have to do a self-assessment, they can simply refer to an existing European standard. And so the work on standards is indeed very important to facilitate its implementation. And thirdly, we work directly with companies. We have an AI Pact, which is a call for companies to anticipate the implementation of the AI Act, not for us to check if they're actually doing that or not, but simply for companies to understand how to actually implement the AI Act. And we have a set of company who has signed up to voluntarily anticipate the requirements of the AI Act. And then when we have best practices, we push them also to many other companies that are following the AI Pact so that they have examples on what they can do. We are also using the Digital Europe program, which is one of the funding programs of the European Union, to fund digital tools that will facilitate the understanding from company, for example, if their AI application is a high-risk application or not. And we are in the process of setting up an AI Act service desk. So for all companies and organizations that have legal questions, they send in their questions, and we will set up a system and a mechanism so that we can provide replies. Next slide. Just one word on the code of practice of general purpose models, because this one is ongoing, this discussion with the stakeholders. So this is a code of practice where we have launched in the summer, and we have about 1,000 participants in this code of practice, plus a number of international organizations and also third countries which are following the code of practice as observers. And this is about, as I said earlier, designing practical steps to comply with the obligations of the AI Act in relation to general purpose models, and with a focus also on those with systemic risk. I have to say that the participation of companies and providers of artificial intelligence models, which are the main addressees, of course, of the Act, is intense. They are participating from different parts of the world. It's a very constructive participation. It's a very intensive participation. And I think that this has a very important value at the international level, because this is something that could be easily followed and implemented at the international level. And so we are about to publish a third draft of this code of practice. The aim is to finalize it in the month of May. Next slide. Just a glimpse to recent activities we have been taking to implement the AI Act. So as I said before, we try to give a lot of guidelines. We have published a list of prohibitions and guidelines also on the definition of AI system. So this is important guidelines which is already available. We are, of course, doing the code of practice on general purpose AI, and we are carrying out a number of webinars under the AI Pact. So if you're a company or an organization interested in knowing more about how to implement different parts of the AI Act, do join these webinars. You'll find all the information online. There are many participants. And I think for awareness raising, and also, as I said earlier, to have some practical examples, it's very important to take part. Next slide. Oh, this was my last slide. So I thank you very much for your attention. And of course, I'm available for questions.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.